Released in 2011, Catherine is a romantic horror JRPG puzzle visual novel game thing made by Persona developers Atlus. It's a strange mix of things, but somehow Catherine ended up becoming one of my all-time favorite games. Anybody that knows me as a gamer probably knows how atrociously bad I am at puzzle games, but for some reason, Catherine clicked with me in just about every way that someone can connect with a game. But it wasn't just for the gameplay, it was for the story and how it related to my own life and experiences. So for today, I want to talk about Catherine, morality, and love. Now, I'm not sure why, but for as long as I can remember in my time of playing video games, I've always wanted to play more adult or mature video games. I wasn't necessarily always allowed to play them, but I wanted to play something that I deemed was for grown-ups. I wasn't a huge Mario fan, but I was big on Resident Evil. Didn't get into Zelda until much later in life, but I did always like Grand Theft Auto. Now, with some exception, I don't think that those two examples are necessarily deep or complex with thought-provoking narratives. They just happen to be very violent franchises, and that was enough for me to be like, yup, I play games for adults at age 10 or whatever. However, it was right around that age, 10 or so, I honestly don't remember, that my parents divorced. And there's an extremely high percentage of families in the United States that get divorced, so I know I'm far from the only person to have seen this happen, but for whatever the reason of any given divorce, the aftermath may vary greatly. I know people who split who managed to stay civil afterwards, people who even remain friends, and then people like my family who resented their ex-spouse, rarely speaking to one another. I often had to relay messages to my parents so that they wouldn't have to do it themselves. I had to listen to both parents talk about how awful of a person the other was and how terrible of a parent they are. And when you're young and starting puberty, already emotionally heightened, the pressure suddenly put on you is immensely overbearing. My parents divorced, to put things lightly, for infidelity, but for a decade I witnessed the turmoil this caused to both parties, to witnessing betrayal, to know they betrayed someone else, spouse and family alike, to feeling fury, frustration, depression, and hopelessness. And it's easy just to paint my family as another statistic and be like, well, he's just the millionth person to have divorced parents this year. But going through it and just having people understand your parents don't live together are nothing alike. And then 2011 comes around, and with it, Atlus's romantic horror JRPG puzzle visual novel game thing, Catherine, and I was in love with it. Still in high school at the time of the game's release, I was immediately connected with the game's story of cheating. The result of my parents' divorce had left me so bitter to cheaters with no real sympathy for those who do it. I'm sure there were other factors behind my liking of the game, such as the designs, characters, humor, and oddly enough the gameplay. I said I was bad at puzzle games, but for whatever reason, Catherine's block puzzles clicked with me. Either way, I had never seen a video game that had dealt with something like this before. Sure, I'd played Silent Hill 2, so I had some other ideas of what exactly not to do to a loved one, but cheating was different. I knew what it did to people. This was something I could directly connect with. Now, there's always a few possible ways that you could play Catherine. 1, treat it like a dating sim and go for whichever waifu tickles your bum just the way you like it. 2, play it in the way that suits your own personal morals and see what ending you get. Or 3, just go through it numerous times to get all the endings, whether you like the outcome or Catherine of choice or lack of should you go for the freedom endings. For me, feeling sympathetic to main protagonist Vincent's original girlfriend, Catherine with a K, my first playthrough of Catherine was spent trying to get Vincent to split up with the voluptuous namesake of the game, Catherine with a C. I mentally painted Vincent as somebody who made a mistake and wanted to make things right by breaking up with C. Catherine in order to save his relationship with his longtime girlfriend K. Catherine. And that's exactly what happened. In the ending I got the first time, Vincent makes up with K. Catherine and proposes, leading to their wedding a few months later. But here's the thing, let's talk about fanfiction for a moment, and trust me, this'll make sense in a minute. Have you ever been sitting around trying to read some saucy story about your favorite pairing, only to realize when you get to the sex scene, this author has never had sex in their life? Well, experience begets understanding things, and though I didn't realize it at the time, that was really what was happening when playing Catherine back in high school. Not a sex thing, but a lack of understanding adult relationships thing. I was a teenager, like all teenagers, thinking he was an adult. I think this was the first time I truly played an adult game. And not adult as in playing some pornographic game, and not adult as in ultra-violent and therefore inappropriate for children, but adult as in focusing on adult stories for adult people. You come to understand what adults go through in their relationships by being an adult and being in a relationship yourself, not just playing a video game or reading a fanfiction that tries to tell you what it's like. Not to say that video games and or fanfiction are entirely wrong, but they aren't a replacement for understanding the things that they are trying to show. You learn that from your own personal experiences, and then you come back and play a game like Catherine and understand it more thoroughly. It becomes more relatable. Perhaps my mind was in the right place when I was a teenager and knowing that cheating is bad and therefore setting my sights on K. Catherine, but at the time, I viewed that as the only real acceptable good ending. I viewed Vincent leaving K for C and being a cheater as the bad ending, where Vincent learns no lessons and selfishly goes after someone else. But the game doesn't outright tell you, the player, that this is bad. The game's mysterious meter changes as a result of 3 different actions: how you respond to text messages to both Catherines in the bar, how you talk to other patrons of the bar and sheep in both the bar and nightmare stages, and how you respond to the confession booth questions. These responses help sway Vincent's mind to shape you towards one of the main 8 endings, but are considered to be on a spectrum of law and chaos or freedom and order, not something as difficult to define as good or evil. Philosophers have debated the meaning of good and evil and what it means to be either since the dawn of civilization, and the definitions we give to them today are arbitrary and up to personal definition. But being that that isn't something most people think about on a daily basis, but rather have ingrained ideas into their own heads on what the other does mean, characters will react to Vincent's situation accordingly to how they view it. They will chastise Vincent for cheating, but they will also sympathize with him and hope he works the situation out. They don't outright claim that what he has done is good or evil, not black or white, but within shades of gray. As I said before, the meter, and by extension the questions in the booth, are on a law and chaos scale, not necessarily good and bad. This makes answering some of the questions challenging at times, whether it be for a challenging question you don't know how to answer, or if you aren't sure how the answers will tip the scale. Some are more obvious than others, such as, do you like the words world domination? But then you have other questions such as, which is more cheating, an emotional tryst or a physical fling? Have you ever been told your romantic standards were too high? Or, which is harder, lying or being lied to? But of course, because morality in this game is viewed as a spectrum and not black and white, you don't necessarily have to perfect responses one way or another to achieve a certain ending. I mentioned going for the true K. Catherine ending earlier, but that can still be achieved with chaos answers to questions, and vice versa for the C. Catherine or freedom endings, so long as they don't make up the vast majority of your responses. So if you're indifferent to the mating habits of the praying mantis, then waifu here will still love you and try not to judge you for your chaotic tendencies. Of course, notwithstanding the game's more supernatural elements, this is an Atlas game after all, I don't think that necessarily removes all sorts of grounding in reality with the game when it does try to show you a broad range of relationships and the respective issues everyone in the Stray Sheep is having with them. Perhaps some are a bit more dramatic and or extreme, but that doesn't mean they can't be rooted in anything genuine. Let's look at a few examples. Justin, the Stray Sheep's resident ex-journalist, has a girlfriend of several years. Though he did not cheat on her, he cannot bring himself to marry her due to self-hatred as a result of a traumatic incident with another woman he believes he contributed to the suicide of. While Justin knows he should break up with his girlfriend if he doesn't feel he can commit to the relationship, he finds he is unable to regardless. While perhaps this backstory with the deceased ballerina he confides in with Vincent is a bit dramatic and not exactly a likely scenario to occur with most people in real everyday life, the inability to commit to a loved one, be it on the basis of the individual or external events like past trauma, is much more likely to happen. Though perhaps for different reasons, Vincent himself is likewise a non-committal person. After all, we see Vincent's entire journey of being uncommitted to his relationships with both Catherines. On the other hand is Todd. Todd was the son of a rich and successful businessman who was liked by everyone and surrounded by women. However, his father abused Todd when Todd didn't meet his expectations. This abuse was both physical and mental, with Todd recounting a story in which his father chased him with an axe and calling him cruel names before ignoring him entirely. However much Todd reviled his father, he viewed his father's life as successful, including his relationship with women. As a result, Todd, despite being married, carries on extramarital affairs with just about any woman that will have him, viewing cheating as a positive thing that people in power do. Though as the game progresses, Todd, if he survives to the end of the nightmare stages, comes to the realization that this mentality is wrong. Finally is Johnny, one of Vincent's old friends and part of his group at the bar. Johnny, though private on the details of the relationship he does have with his girlfriend, states early in the game that he has no intention of marrying her, and that unless he finds his soulmate, he won't ever marry, something he appears content with. However, late in the game, the player can find Johnny in the nightmare world, where if you talk to him, he will question if he's having the nightmares as punishment for betraying his best friend, and will later explain to Vincent, not knowing it's him, that he doesn't want to steal her from him, stating that he loves her, but can't do anything about it. Johnny's explanation for being in the nightmares is in that moment revealed to be for his attraction with K. Catherine despite his current relationship to a woman he won't marry. Interestingly, Johnny is not slow to suggest Vincent break up with Catherine when he suspects she is cheating as well, and will also tell him in the freedom endings he tried unsuccessfully asking Catherine out. Whether or not you feel that any of these people are correct in their different viewpoints, part of being an adult is understanding that different people with different histories and relationships will thusly treat future relationships differently. You can listen to Justin's story and understand that his history of self-blame and doubt have stunted him in his relationship. You can listen to Todd and understand that he objectifies women as a result of his womanizing yet physically abusive father. You can witness Johnny's turmoil over being in love with his best friend's girlfriend and understand that people can't always help who they fall in love with. This still helps to paint a wider picture of how someone can possibly view a relationship, regardless of whether or not they individually or we as a society deem it to be morally correct. When my parents divorced, I didn't understand how anybody could possibly cheat. It seemed unthinkable to me, and if I asked that specific person about it now, I know they would tell me that they never thought they would cheat. It was never in their intention to hurt anybody, and they would never have thought a relationship of theirs would have ended in such a way. But back then I didn't understand that. I didn't yet have the experience of a long-standing romantic relationship, but once you've entered a relationship, it becomes a lot easier to understand something. We as humans do stupid things, and maybe not intentionally. Humans are the most advanced species on this planet. We're capable of civilizations, complex thinking, creating works of art, and so forth. We're capable of love and the happiness it brings, but we're also capable of destruction, whether it be imposed on others or ourselves. But I like to think that for the most part, humans are well-intentioned and as a result can still make genuine mistakes. That even if they hurt people, they were never committed with the intent of malice. And I think Catherine is a game that came out at just the right time for me. It didn't teach me lessons about adulthood, I had to figure those out for myself, but it did give me a narrative I could relate to, an adult narrative, one where characters all express different points of view on a subject I was already witnessing at the time. And while I've long since gotten over the divorce, I am, after all, an adult and in a very happy and loving long-term relationship myself now, I really think Atlas played a small part in giving me something to latch onto when it seemed I couldn't turn to other adults in my life. But I think that's about all I have to say on the matter. There's plenty more I could talk about on this game. I really do love it for plenty of other reasons, and I'm sure this video makes my life sound way more dramatic than it actually is, but I swear I'm a happy and healthy person, y'all. So in the meantime, let's cut the melodrama and board the hype train for full body. And with that, thanks for listening to my long and hopefully cohesive rant about a game I enjoy, and I'll see you all in the next video.